Antibiotics makes chickens bigger, significantly bigger. You can actually see this because when you go to the market and you get the broiler chicken, it's twice the size of the desi one.
People say, I have a gut feeling. Is the brain and the gut connected?
Let me blow your mind. Do you actually know we have a gut-heart axis in humans that confer the connection between the composition of our gut microbiome and our choices for romantic mates? More than 90% of serotonin in the body is produced in the gut. You eliminate the bacteria from the gut, no serotonin.
So that means people having a lot of anxiety, it's related to the gut?
You need to understand a couple things. First of all, in India we abuse antibiotics a lot. People get antibiotics without prescription from the pharmacist, or the doctor would prescribe them antibiotics for things that not necessarily require any intervention. And antibiotics are...
If you've ever felt like your gut has a mind of its own, you're not wrong. Turns out it's just not connected to your brain, but your heart too. I learned this from Max Kushnir, co-founder and chief scientific officer at Sova Health. From gut-brain and gut-heart connections to why Rajma suits some but wrecks others, Max breaks it all down for you and me. He busts myths around pre, pro and postbiotics, exposes India's antibiotic overload and explains why C-section babies need extra gut love. We also dive into why Indian guts are stronger than Western ones and why testing your gut isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. Trust me, this one will change the way you look at your gut forever.
Max, how was the flight? Thank you for flying in all the way from Berlin.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it was long, but worth it.
So, when you explained my microbiome test to me, I was quite intrigued about the technical explanation that you went into, and it was pretty technical, but at the same time very easy. So I was like, Max and I need to have a discussion together. And then I kind of checked you out on LinkedIn and I saw that you had done cancer genomics. What was your journey? Where did you start? Where were you born actually? And how did you end up in this world of tiny microorganisms?
Interesting. Yeah, so I was born in the Soviet Union, but I spent most of my life living in Israel. And currently in the last 8 years I've been living in Berlin, and I've been kind of traveling between Berlin and Gurgaon quite a bit. How I end up studying biology is that I was always very interested in science, and very early on I discovered that I had this superpower, if you will, to take a very complicated scientific concept, understand it well, and then relay that information to others. So even in my high school, I was basically the person preparing my entire class for their bio exams, because I could very easily explain, or very relatably explain, complex concepts by using, everyday euphemisms. I feel that if you can't explain something to your 5-year-old, you don't understand it well enough.
True. You've worked across countries, thousands of people, and you've done this gut microbiome. What is the microbiome? And why are we so enamored today about these bacteria in our gut?
So the microbiome is a community.
Okay.
It's a community of different types of microorganisms, and it's not just bacteria. Actually, most of it is, but around 5 to 7% is divided between fungi and protozoans, viruses, and they all work together as a community to perform certain functions in our colon. So there's a debate in the last few years about what is the exact ratio between microbes and human cells in the gut, and some people say it's 10 to 1, and some people say it's 1 to 1. But I think a more interesting point is that in the human genome, we have around 10,000 genes that are coding for proteins that the body can use. And in the microbiome, we have between 50 to 100,000. So the amount of complexity that the microbiome is able to produce is an order of magnitude more than our own. And we can consider the microbiome as another organ in the body, from the sense that in biology or medicine, when we define what an organ is, we would say it is a congregation of different types of cells with a common function. So for example, the heart. The heart is an organ and it's pumping blood, and it's comprised out of muscle cells and epithelial cells and nerve cells, and all of these, they work together to deliver the function. Now, if you take the nerve cells away from the heart, you lose the function. You can't pump blood anymore. If there are too many muscle cells in the heart, you also get various types of diseases. But basically, it's a loss of balance. So you can think of it like an organization, like a company that has a sales department and a marketing department and a product department. And no company can only be comprised by salespeople, right? That's going to be very inefficient, and vice versa. So these microbes, they're also a community of different types of cells, and they also deliver actually many functions, not a single function for our body, that our body cannot get on its own. And therefore, the body lets these microorganisms live in the colon because they pay rent. It's not free. Nothing is free in nature, and this is why. And in the last couple of years, we've gained this amazing ability to start looking at the microbiome at scale, right? So there's technologies like genetic sequencing that we can talk about maybe later in more detail that let us understand who lives in the gut, because most of these creatures we can't really grow ourselves.
So it's like an Aadhaar card for each microbiome.
Yes.
You get each guy's sequenced, and you know who's living inside your gut.
Exactly. We can talk about how microbiome testing works, but yeah, I think you got it right, Ryan. And I think it's the story that we keep discovering is that it's not about who lives in your gut, it's more about actually who's missing. Yeah. So because these organisms perform certain functions that the body needs, when those organisms get extinct from the gut, then we might start getting sick.
So we live in India, and I think Indians take pride about having very strong guts because we eat a lot of street food and masala food. But what are the problems now that you are looking at the Indian gut microbiome? What are the common problems that India is facing that you've been able to document or observe or keenly firsthand interpret when you are talking to clients and patients?
Yeah, I think that's a very, very good point. Firstly, I'd like to say personally, in evolutionary terms, or when we look at genetics of populations, we would always say that it's not survival of the strongest, it's survival of the fittest. So every microbiome develops to accommodate for the conditions that it develops in, right? So an Indian person, I would call it the desi microbiome, if you will.
Okay.
It's actually several subtypes of different microbiomes because India is actually very big and very diverse in terms of nutrition and genetics. But these microbiomes are actually evolved to accommodate for certain functions. For example, in people who are vegetarians, we would see it's actually very easy to tell. I can tell by a microbiome test whether a person is vegetarian or not. Because the main species of bacteria that they would have would actually be accommodating for that diet. The main problems that I'm seeing in India is that the statistic is, and I can get maybe the exact number later, is that over 50% of all Indians have IBS by definition.
What is IBS?
So IBS is a chronic medical condition. It's called irritable bowel syndrome. And it is diagnosed via a certain criteria. It's called the Rome 4 criteria, medical criteria, where if I'm having symptoms like indigestion, inconsistency in my stool, abdominal pain, too much gas for over 3 months, so either one or two of these symptoms, then I am considered as an IBS patient, which is a chronic disease. Now, I think that India is already well known in the world as the world queen of metabolic disease, right? The capital, the diabetes capital of the world. But I think it's well known here that IBS is actually much more prevalent in India, even than diabetes, and most people tend to accept this as normal, right? It's normal that I'm having acidity, it's normal that I'm having, a bellyache, it's normal that I'm having diarrhea, but it's actually not.
Okay.
And over time, these things can have serious implications on health. And all of these symptoms are actually connected back to not having certain organisms in the gut, which also means that all of these eventually can be corrected.
So are you saying there are certain everyday habits that people can bring into their life, and it's because people are not maybe nutritionally focused or environmental focused that their gut microbiome is getting slapped around? And so are there things that you see that they can do as everyday habits to improve gut health?
Yeah. I think this recommendation would actually have two parts. One part is the don't do, and the most important thing that I can think about is that in India we abuse antibiotics a lot. People get antibiotics without prescription from the pharmacist, or the doctor would prescribe them antibiotics for things that not necessarily require any intervention. And antibiotics are indiscriminate killer for the gut. It's a total disaster for the gut, because even if we have a throat infection, we'll still take our antibiotics orally normally. And those antibiotics would go through the colon and they would just devastate whatever is there. So that is one thing that I would highly suggest. So I come from Germany right now, right? I live in Germany. In Germany, if you want to get an antibiotic, you get it post-mortem, basically. You go to your doctor and your doctor says, yeah, good. Now just rest. And respiratory infections are very common in India, and antibiotics are called. And there's actually around 1/3 of all IBS cases are termed as post-antibiotic IBS. It's actually a term. So antibiotics, they have side effects, they have dangers, and they're very, very important required medicines that save a lot of lives when used correctly.
So what you're saying, Max, is that a lot of the gut problems that we may be seeing today in India is because of rampant self-prescription or abuse or incorrect taking of antibiotics for common sicknesses. And actually, you should just allow your immune system to help you along the way, and maybe get it only in prescription from a doctor rather than the pharmacist.
Correct. So I think that a normal respiratory infection, even with fever, as per the medical guidelines, for the first 2 or 3 days, it is, again, as per the doctor's orders, but in most cases, it's actually okay to wait and just let the body rest and recover on their own, because half of these infections are viral infections, and we have no way of knowing that, and antibiotics are completely useless for viruses. So you end up actually making your body weaker while you're sick. So it's not there's no benefit to taking antibiotics when the body can actually deal with the infection on its own.
But when you and I were working on my microbiome, it was very interesting, because I haven't taken an antibiotic in over a decade and a half. Maybe I took it once for some tooth extraction, where the dentist insisted, and I was like, okay, I got to listen to you. But I had antibiotic resistance.
Correct. Most people will. So I think we might want to back up a bit to talk about how the test works, or how antibiotic resistance works. When we test a gut microbiome, what we would do is we would actually take a stool sample, which is right now quite a solved process. It's some people are kind of deterred by it, but there are collection kits that make it quite seamless. And we would extract the DNA, which is the basic, material of life, or that stores information about any type of life form, from a virus to a banana to us, and definitely a bacteria. And we would sequence this DNA, which means that we would take the DNA and we would turn it into text. And this text is, I think you wisely said before, it's like a fingerprint. We can actually determine who does this piece of DNA is belonging to. And right now we have very, very powerful tests. So each test can actually check for 31,000 different types of organisms in a single sample, which is insane. It's something that, like, last 2 years ago we could do maybe 5,000. 10 years ago we could do 30, right? So the power of this technology is growing exponentially. Now we can actually get a really good picture about, a given gut. And when we get this information, we can also sequence genes that confer information about antibiotic resistance. And antibiotic resistance in general is a very interesting process. Most antibiotics that we get today actually come from nature. We didn't invent them. So they come from fungi.
Correct.
And fungi compete in nature with bacteria over the same food source. They all like to eat sugar. But bacteria, they have a significant advantage over fungi because they multiply much quicker, right? Every 20 minutes, every 30 minutes, depending on the organism, you have a new cell. And for fungi, it's a matter of hours and sometimes days. So the fungus had to adapt, right? And it started making antibiotics, basically poisoning the entire environment around where the fungus lives so that it can keep the sugar to itself. But bacteria also evolved, right? And they started making different proteins to neutralize the antibiotics, to disintegrate it, to store it somewhere, stow it away, so that they can still have the food. And this process is happening in our gut. So whenever our gut is exposed to antibiotics, there is a chance that somewhere a bacteria will pick up this trait and put this memory of this trait into its DNA, right? And this is how we can actually get this information and say, Ryan, that you have, resistance to this or that antibiotic. So I think we do around 200 antibiotics in the test. And that can actually help the doctor to choose antibiotics that's going to work better for you. Now, why is that? Because whenever you take an antibiotic even if you have a throat infection, it has to go through your gut, right? Mostly we don't inject our antibiotics. It's inconvenient. We don't want to do it. We just take a pill. And this pill will go through the gut. And in the gut, it might meet an organism that can actually break it down. So you're thinking that you took, ampicillin, for example, and you took a certain dose, but a certain amount of that ampicillin can actually be completely nullified in your gut, and what's going to go to your throat infection is actually half dose, right? And there are 4 main reasons to get an antibiotic resistance in the gut that this is maybe a public service for everyone. How can you protect yourself against this? 1, don't take antibiotics if you don't absolutely have to. I think that's established. 2, if you take antibiotics, by God, finish the course.
Do all the 5 days or 7 days?
Do all the 5 days, 7 days, 14 days, whatnot. Because what happens? I have a viral infection. I feel very sick in the first 2 days. I go to my doctor. I get an antibiotic. Day 3, I'm fine. Why should I take this bad medicine? It has side effects, right? I shouldn't take it. But what that does is it actually leaves survivors in your gut, in my gut.
And the survivors are very, very angry. Then.
And they're very angry and strong, right? And next time they say this antibiotic, next time they would meet this antibiotic, like they're
I
gonna break it up.
I remember you from last time. And
Exactly.
you're not gonna kill me this time.
Yeah, you're not gonna get me this time.
So that's called antibiotic resistance.
That's called antibiotic resistance, and this is a huge problem with some pathogens like H. pylori or tuberculosis, where you actually have to find antibiotics that's going to work because this pathogen is resistant to the antibiotic. But we have more systemic resistances, like there's going to be one bacteria that's going to be resistant to the antibiotic in the gut, and the bacteria infecting my throat is completely susceptible. I can kill it with the antibiotic. But because it goes through my gut, right, the antibiotic is not as potent anymore because I'm going to have less of a dose. So don't abuse antibiotics. Don't leave any survivors in the gut. Source your meat, poultry, and eggs from responsible sources. Why is that? Because in poultry farming, especially the industrial poultry farming, there's a very massive use of antibiotics.
Massive use.
For 2 reasons. First reason is the chickens themselves are grown in very, very confined conditions, and they peck each other, and they tend to get infections because of this. So the farmer is trying to mitigate for that and grow as many chickens on a given piece of land. So they use antibiotics. And the second thing, which is the more maybe less known one, is that antibiotics makes chickens bigger, significantly bigger.
Say that again. Antibiotics make the chicken
Make
bigger?
the chicken bigger. This is a side effect of antibiotics that was discovered, and you can actually see this because when you go to the market and you get the broiler chicken, it's twice the size of the desi one. Right? When you get a
like
desi
the fact
chicken,
that he says desi chicken.
it's the normal chicken or the organic chicken, right? They are significantly smaller than the broiler ones. Now, as per regulations, and I'm pretty sure they're followed, 1 week before this chicken is going to get sold and slaughtered and processed, they would stop giving the antibiotics to wash the antibiotics out of the system. But what stays is the antibiotic-resistant bacteria that the chicken carries. So when you have the egg, when you have the chicken, when you have the meat that comes from these farms, then you're basically saying, antibiotic-resistant bacteria, welcome, please come in and come live in my gut. Now, it's not the end of the world. There's competition in the gut and it changes, but it definitely, over time it can also change, but it's definitely not a healthy practice to have. So if you are to consume any meat and you're not vegetarian, then taking this into account can work. And the fourth reason is having a doctor in the family. Many of us in India, we have a doctor in the family, and the doctor normally works at a clinic or at a hospital where they use a lot of antibiotics. And when they use a lot of antibiotics, some of these antibiotics create antibiotic-resistant organisms, especially in healthcare spaces. And the doctor would then contract those and bring those home on the robe. So the recommendation is, like, if you have a work set of clothes, leave that at work. And Ryan, that's relevant for you because you're seeing patients, and some of these patients are taking antibiotics, and it's very important to have a robe and to use that robe for work and to disinfect it regularly.
Wow. I think a lot of people in India are going to start wearing their robes only in the chambers and not going to the market to buy their vegetables.
Before they eat their chicken.
Yeah. That's deep insight. In fact, after I realized that I had antibiotic resistance, I actually shift to the desi chicken.
Okay,
Very
good.
And the first week was difficult because you're used to this broiler that is so fleshy and large. But then the knowledge was like, this is what caused my antibiotic resistance. Could be.
Normally, if something is looking too good,
you got to question
you
it.
gotta, yeah.
And I think it's responsibility also for us influencers to educate the general population that they do control their health in their own hands.
Absolutely.
People say, I have a gut feeling. Max, as a scientist, let's define to everyone what is gut.
What is gut? Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, so humans, and other mammals have a digestive tract. When we say digestive tract, we actually mean anything from mouth to the exit point. And this entire pathway or congregation of different organs are meant to digest and process the food that we're putting into our body, right? Once food is digested in the stomach, it would continue going into the small intestine, where most of the nutrients from the food would actually be absorbed. And post this, it will continue going into the large intestine or the colon, which we would normally refer to as the gut, right? So
also, the stomach is not the gut.
the stomach is not the gut. The stomach is not part of the gut. When we say gut or colon, we normally mean the large intestines, so parts of it. This is a very, very important organ, by far the largest in the digestive system. And this is where some of the nutrients that we haven't digested or haven't absorbed before are absorbed. And this is home to between 13 and 130 trillion microorganisms that we call the gut microbiome.
So most Indians think that the stomach is the gut, but you have just clarified to us that's not true. So really thank you for opening up our eyes that the gut is the large intestine. It has trillions of bacteria, and that is called the gut microbiome.
That's correct.
Awesome. आप वेजिटेरियन है नॉन वेजिटेरियन है?
मैं
हाँ.
नॉन वेज है.
नॉन वेज है. आप बोल रहे हैं कि जो वेजिटेरियन खा रहे हैं अलग वाला माइक्रोबायोम और नॉन वेज में अलग वाला माइक्रोबायोम.
I understood what you said, but I'm going to answer in English. Yeah, you get major changes between vegetarian microbiomes and non-vegetarian microbiomes. Yeah, because what you feed your microbiome actually is what is going to influence the composition the most.
Tell me something. I have a question. We've talked about the gut, and people say, I have a gut feeling. Is the brain and the gut connected?
Yeah. So there's a theory about, or there's several theories about the connection between the gut and the brain. They're all clubbed under the concept of the gut-brain axis. And I think the gut-brain axis is something that is discussed throughout in many podcasts and articles online. But
I see you're smiling.
yeah, but I actually, do you actually know we have a gut-heart axis? So that's a cool one. I've actually read a few studies in humans that confer the connection between the composition of our gut microbiome and our choices for romantic mates. How cool is that, right?
So forget the perfume.
Yeah.
Figure out your gut microbiome.
Exactly. So there was one study, it's called the T-shirt study, where scientists actually took T-shirts from male students and they sequenced their gut microbiome. They took some other parameters like some immune parameters that might also influence this. And then they took those T-shirts and they let female students smell the T-shirts and kind of rate, which scent do I find most attractive. And then they sequence also the microbiome composition of the female students, and they actually found a significant correlation between the two because of the chemicals the microbiome was making. So I just wanted to slip that in because I think
so
it's
gut feeling could also be
exactly.
relationship to the heart.
Exactly, right? We also have a gut feeling when I met my wife, I was very excited. Please let that go into the podcast. I had a gut feeling.
But what about the brain?
But what about the brain? Yeah. So the microbiome can influence our brain in several different ways. So there are three major pathways. The first one is a direct pathway. The microbes in our colon actually make neurotransmitters. Very significant amounts of neurotransmitters. I think one very famous neurotransmitter is called serotonin. This is the molecule that is responsible for our sensation of well-being, but also for some motor functions. And more than 90% of serotonin in the body by sheer weight is produced in the gut. You eliminate the bacteria from the gut, no serotonin.
So that means people who are having a lot of anxiety and stuff, it's related to the gut?
Yes, and in more than one way. Right now, there's a controversy about this subject because on one hand, a lot of these neurotransmitters are made in the gut, but they cannot cross the blood-brain barrier. So to prove that these neurotransmitters that are specifically made in the gut make their way to the central nervous system, to the brain, nobody was able to do that until now. However, the microorganisms themselves don't have receptors for these chemicals, right? So this molecule is like a signal, right? And it's like a ball, right? So if I have the ball, I'm going to throw the ball to you, you're going to catch it. So they have no way to catch the ball that they're holding, right? So that means that probably they're making it for someone else.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one. Two is that there's a vast body of research where there has been found associations between not having certain organisms in the gut, and these organisms are producing neurotransmitters, and having depression and anxiety. Now, statistics is not mechanics, because it could be that my depression is causing my gut microbiome composition to also alter, right? It's a chicken and egg question. But there's definitely an association between not having certain organisms in the gut and being more prone to mental health conditions like anxiety and depression, but also more severe conditions, right? Bipolar disorder, ADHD, these things have also been found to be in very, very, very close correlation with certain gut microbiome compositions. So the first way that microbes can actually influence our brain or our sensation, our mood, is through actually making these molecules. Probably it's connected. The second way they can do it is actually because microbes in the colon can elicit the production of certain hormones. Okay? And these hormones can affect very, 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 very large number of processes in the body, from metabolic regulation to immune function, and we're going to talk about that, and to the general sense of stress or well-being. So stress hormones like cortisol or epinephrine, adrenaline, they are have a some of their production can actually be attributed to a certain composition of gut microbes. And thirdly, a healthy gut microbiome produces chemicals that help our immune system to calm down. Now, preventing this inflammation, which is a low-grade inflammation that we can have for many years, it's a chronic condition, one of the things that this inflammation can do is it can elicit the secretion of stress hormones, because when we get sick and when we get stressed, a lot of the hormones that our body would make, cortisol is a great example, would actually be the same hormones.
So Max, as a nutritionist, what I heard from you is, if I can pictorially say this out aloud, when we eat something, it goes to our gut ultimately, which is the large intestine, where there are these trillions of bacteria, and we are actually feeding these bacteria.
Correct.
And they are chomp, eating this, and they figuratively are pooping a byproduct or secreting a byproduct.
Not figuratively, literally.
Literally pooping,
literally pooping out
in your
byproduct.
intestine, and they're releasing good molecules or bad molecules. And the good molecules could be coming from the good bacteria because you've fed them nicely, or the bad molecules could be coming from the good or bad bacteria because you're feeding the wrong type of stuff to them also.
Okay, let me blow your mind.
Yes.
Okay, cool. So bacteria, as you said, they live in the colon and they feed from whatever reaches them. Okay? Now, most of the stuff that we've eaten has already been digested and absorbed by that point, right? Because we talked about the digestive tract, when we chew our food, it gets digested in the stomach. Most of it is absorbed in the small intestine. Then whatever is left is going to be in the colon. Now, there's a certain group of carbohydrates that feed the gut microbiome. Okay, so let's actually break it down. Bacteria like to eat sugar. Bacteria eat very little protein. Protein is not a very good growth media for bacteria. Fat, they have no idea what to do with. Okay?
Oh, they have no idea to do fat.
They're not very good at it. Okay, so this is why your oil is not going bad at home, right? Can't live in that. They need to live in water, and they're not very good at having fat. So the main food source, energy source for bacteria is always carbohydrates. But most carbohydrates, when we eat them, we're able to break them down and absorb them much before they get to the gut, so to the colon. There's a certain type of carbohydrates, and they're called FODMAPs, F-O-D-M-A-P. It's an acronym. It stands for fermentable oligosaccharides, monosaccharides, diols, and polyols. Hopefully I didn't miss anything out. Very long words for sugars that we are not able to digest or absorb. Okay, so when we eat those sugars, they will actually reach the colon and feed the bacteria that are there. And depending on which bacteria do we have in the gut, will we get symptoms. So Ryan, you said it's really important, what do I feed my bacteria? It is, but just like in people, right? Food is food. It can feed bad people and it can feed good people. But which bacteria do we have in our colon will actually determine whether we have symptoms like having gas. So for example, many of our patients, I think the most common symptom is being gassy, being bloated, having a bit of flatulence. And what I always tell my patients as a joke is that it's not you, it's your bacteria. So the 99% of gas in our body is actually produced by bacteria in the colon from these carbohydrates that we feed our microbiome. So when you let one out and you say it's not me, now that you have this knowledge, if they put you through a lie detector, You're clean.
Absolutely clean.
You're clean.
It's the
You know it's
microbiome.
not. It's my bacteria. It's not me. Now, what's fun about it is that these FODMAPs is something that we eat every day. The most common example would be fiber. Okay? So fiber has the same molecular composition as starch or sugar. It's basically a chain of glucose molecules that are strung together into a polymer, right? But they're attached to each other in such a way that the enzymes in our stomach, they don't know how to cut it into individual glucose molecules, so we can just absorb it, right? So when we have white rice, which is mostly starch, the starch will be turned very quickly into individual glucose molecules in our colon and absorbed into the bloodstream. Very little of it, if at all, would actually reach our gut. But if you have brown rice, all of a sudden, then we have fiber in that mix, right? If we hit a rajma, for example, then we're going to have fiber and glucans, which is a type of sugar that our body also cannot process very well. If we have an apple, right, that has some sugars also that will reach our colon. In the colon, the composition of the bacteria that we have there would actually influence the byproduct. So for example, if we have a full array of lactic bacteria living in our colon, these lactic bacteria will take the fiber, digest it, poop out short-chain fatty acids, which is gold for our gut. We can talk about those maybe a bit later. And they would make certain vitamins that our body doesn't make enough of on its own. And they will make lactic acid, which is a benign byproduct that we can, pass on with our stool. What they will not make, however, is gas.
Max, you mentioned that all emotions are stored in the gut. Like when you have a meal sometimes, you feel happy. Well, not relatively a happy meal from a fast food giant, but when you eat certain foods, you feel happy. And then sometimes people actually gravitate towards those foods. They may not be healthy for you, but they kind of give you a feel-good factor. And there are certain foods that make you feel miserable. So how do foods impact the moods of people?
Yeah, I think food can impact the mood of people in definitely more than one way. It's been proven that when we have sugary foods or foods that have high glycemic index, we would have a release of pleasurable neurotransmitters, endorphins. But what we also know today is that bacteria in the colon would actually reward us with making neurotransmitters after we actually feed them. So having fiber can have a longer lasting effect for a good mood or a good motion than having sugar, which is basically, if you think of it, as like short-term gratification versus long-term gratification, because having fiber in the diet while having a healthy microbiome can actually protect us from anxiety and depression, like we've discussed.
So Max, I work in Bollywood, and we always have the film script of a hero and a villain. In the gut bacteria, do we have the good guys and the bad guys?
So Ryan, what I found in my experience is that it's not that there's a villain in the gut. So in Bollywood terms, there's no gunda. But we actually have the heroes missing. There's one bacteria, and I call it the Salman Khan of the gut. And these bacteria, they're called bifidobacteria.
So they're the bodybuilders.
They're the bodyguards, right? Salman Khan has a very famous movie, Bodyguard.
Yeah.
Kareena Kapoor, Salman Khan. Okay. These guys are the Salman Khans of the gut.
Okay.
Why? When they are present, they are protecting the gut from pathogens. Anytime we have, we crave a samosa late night, or we see our favorite, Golgappa wala, and we want to get the Golgappa at night, right? You know this. It's not perfectly sanitary food, let's admit it. But we don't want to think of that when we're getting it. So lucky for us, for some of us, we have our Shah Rukh Khans in the gut, bifidobacteria, to protect us. Because whenever the salmonella reaches our colon and it wants to settle on the lining of the gut, there's going to be a bifidobacteria living there saying, "Are boss, please move along. This is my home.
Okay.
And these bifidobacteria, when they are missing, it's like the security guards are out of our gut, and our immune system will actually start overreacting. Because bifidobacteria make a chemical, it's called a short chain fatty acid, as the byproduct of, they poop it out literally. And these short chain fatty acids would be identified by the immune system, and they're anti-inflammatory molecules.
So there are different species of bifidobacter. And so when you do the test to kind of find out which of these security guards are missing.
Yeah, so I think that one of the powers of the test is that we can identify organisms into the substrain level, right? So when we think of it, it's a technical term and I'll explain. You can think of it like that. A species is, we can talk about species as a biological classification. Species could be dogs, right? But there's different kinds of dogs, right? There's pincher dogs that are very small. I have one, it's very annoying. I love him. And we have the German Shepherds, right? Or Great Danes. They're all dogs, but they're very, very different from each other. So whenever we go into the strain level, which is exactly what you said, there are many different strains of bifidobacter that are present, we can actually identify which is which and which is missing. And then, in fact, there are specific strains of bacteria that are typical to India, but are not typical to Europe. And there's a name for this. I call it the big decibiotics and gorabiotics conundrum, where we have species of bifidobacteria found in Europeans that are not found in Indians. And these bacteria specifically have adapted to live in a desigut, right? Getting beat up all the time by salmonellas and mirchis coming along, and they grew tough. And they're much more effective for an Indian person than they would be for a European, and vice versa.
So an Indian living in Germany or New York
would
have a desi gut or would have a gora gut?
That's a very, very good question.
Any
Yeah. So we've started exactly for this reason. So we currently are sitting on the largest database of desi guts in the world, over 35,000 samples. And as I already said, the microbiome has massive changes between Caucasians and South Asians, Indians, for that matter. And this is a conundrum, right? Because we actually have quite a vibrant NRI community, in our patients, and also vice versa. Me being the first exhibit A, right? I'm the desigora, if you will. And these people have significantly different microbiome compositions, but they're actually more close to Goras than they are to India. So from
Which is why when you come to India as an NRI, your gut is more sensitive.
Oh, absolutely.
So you don't have the desi microflora basically.
Again, when we talk about, so I come from a field that's called population genetics. Population genetics is, instead of looking at the genetics of one individual, I'm looking at the genetic landscape of an entire population. And in cancer, this can be individual cancer cells in the body. In microbiome, it can be individual bacteria in a single microbiome, or it can actually be what is the population of people that have different microbiomes.
So cuisines like Goan cuisine, Konkan cuisine, Bengali cuisine,
Yes.
Punjabi cuisine could also affect.
Yes, I think that the most marked differences that we're seeing within India would be between Bengalis and everyone else, actually. I don't know why. I guess the combination of rice and fish does something. But also genetic markup.
In a good way. Or it's just different.
It's just different. Yeah, we can't always explain if it's good or bad, or we can't always explain. We can just observe at this point to say, some population of NRI Indians. It also classifying NRIs is also very hard, right? Because a person living in Australia and a person living in Germany, the US, or Japan, right? They have very different diets.
The diet also has a significant impact.
Yeah, so there would be like 4 or 5 factors that would influence the composition of one's microbiome. One is genetics, right? Two is whether I'm having a chronic disease. So diabetes, for example, would massively change the composition of microbiome. It's almost at a diagnostic point, like we can almost diagnose diabetes today from a poop test, because the changes are very typical and very massive. What is my diet? What do I eat mostly? And I'm not just talking veg, non-veg. I'm talking what kind of vegetables I'm having, what are my fiber sources, and my environment, right? Where do I contract my bacteria? So a lot of the bacteria we have in our gut, Ryan, actually come from the soil. Or I don't know if it's politically correct, but a lot of the bacteria, or at least some of the bacteria we have in our gut, are vaginal bacteria, right? Which is another very interesting topic. During childbirth, and sometimes we actually lose these bacteria, and people say, "Oh, I'm just going to get it from food," you know. Well, either you really diversify your menu or you take a probiotic.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that explains why C-section babies have more stressed out immune systems in the earlier years as compared to normal vaginal delivery babies.
One of the most important jobs of the gut microbiome early on in childhood is in the first 2 or 3 years of life, it educates the immune system. It educates the immune system. It mediates a lot of the, we call it the complement pathway, but in non-technical terms, it basically helps the immune system to learn what to react against and when to stay calm, okay? Because our immune system, it has one job, and this job is to basically tell self from non-self. If it's me, then I'm chilling. If it's not me, then I should do something about it. And this is how we get allergies, for example, where the immune system actually reacts against proteins we get through our food, mainly, right? Or from external sources. And these proteins are safe proteins, like we should be having food, it's okay, right? But our immune system didn't learn.
Science is really getting deep and interesting.
Crazy.
Let's get into the testing part. You know, people complain, I have bloating, farting, gas, and those are the least of a gut issue. But then we have the brain issue, we have so many issues that come out. So let's dive in a little bit deeper into the gut. First of all, you talked about taking a poop sample, right? And then you DNA sequence it. And then you figure out about all of these bacteria. People always ask me this question, why should I test?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. So the gut microbiome is another organ in the body, like we've already established. And when this organ is sick, the entire body can get sick over time. And it ranges from symptoms of indigestion, inconsistency in stool or abdominal pain, and until, mental health problems, or, the gut not being able to absorb what we digest. That's also a very important job that the microbiome does. Or even it can influence the amount of calories we extract and store from our food. So, having a healthy microbiome can kind of rig the game for you, making you fat. So for all of these reasons, we might want to look also at the gut, among other things, right? The weighing scale is still very relevant and blood testing is very relevant. But now we have this new way of looking at our health that's, exponentially more powerful than what we've had before. And we can make some very good decisions based on this information. But I think the main advantage of gut testing is that we can change the composition of our gut microbiome and make it healthy again, right? With our genetics, our genome is, we got it, we have what we have, and so far we're not very good at, changing our own genomes. I'm sure that will come at some point as well. But the microbiome is plastic. We can actually change it. So the current version of the microbiome test can actually give us information about which bacteria live in our gut, which bacteria are missing, which bacteria are found in the gut that should not be there, which pathogens that we can actually detect on a very sensitive level, which antibiotics should we or should we not be taking? And this is very, very relevant for subsets of people that need to use antibiotics, either to cure repeated infections, throat infections, right? What's going to be more effective for me? Or for people that have a specific condition like TB or an H. pylori infection, which maybe we'll touch on later. These help to make the antibiotics more efficient. It can tell us about which vitamins we might be deficient to or we should incorporate more to in our diet. What is the status of neurotransmitters produced or not produced in our gut? And I think now we have a new test which can actually predict which foods am I going to be tolerant or intolerant to.
The microbiome test is a better determinant factor as compared to an IgG blood test?
Yes, and I'll tell you why. Most people that suffer from food intolerance never got an allergy. An allergy is when I get symptoms like hives. I'm scratching all over. I have, swelling in my extremities. I'm finding it hard to breathe. I have leaky mucous membranes. My eyes are tearing, my nose is leaking. And that would happen normally between half an hour and 4 hours after me consuming the food. That's an allergy.
So Max, okay, we're talking about allergies and it's actually in the gut microbiome, and it's not so much that food is the culprit. And we nutritionists sometimes feel that food is the culprit, but as a microbiome researcher, you're saying that the culprit lies in not having the good Salman Khan inside of you to kind of digest the food and break it up, even if it's like something that's not working with your body. How far has the microbiome research gone so far, and where do you think it's heading in the future? What's exciting for me as a nutritionist that's going to come up?
Oh, I think that in the last 10 years, we got the ability to sequence cheaply and vastly. So as I said, from looking at a single strain maybe 15 years ago, we can look at thousands of strains as of now. The future is actually in RNA. So DNA gives us the information about what kind of proteins could potentially be produced in a gut, in a system. RNA will actually give us the information of which proteins are produced at this moment.
So you're saying the gut microbiome literally in the future could become real time.
Yes.
I wouldn't have to wait 5 to 6 weeks for my report to come back.
I don't know if continuous monitoring of the microbiome itself is where we're headed, but there are tests around metabolomic tests. Metabolomics is basically tracking a vast number, like hundreds of metabolites in one test. And this is where the field is going in the next 10, 15 years. So we're actually going to start connecting the different dots into a single system. We're going to have DNA, RNA, metabolites, metabolites from different, orifices, blood, urine, and then the amount of insight that we're able to get out of this information is obviously more actionable, right? So today we know already to say, as a nutritionist, right, the gut microbiome test helps us to make decisions better, like which foods we might introduce or exclude at a certain point, and how might we efficiently reach diversity in the nutrition. This should be the eventual goal of every nutritionist. We want to reach a diversity in nutrition. We want to have as much variety in the food of our patients as possible always. So what I tell my patients, my ultimate goal, which is attainable, it's achievable goal, is to have every food group represented in your diet. Okay? But not every food item maybe, because there are things we don't know, and this is the future. We're going to go to a better resolution. So you might not have milk.
I could live with that.
Yeah, but you might have cheese and you might have something else. Specifically with lactose intolerance, this is a very it's a bit of an outlier, because lactose is a sugar, and it basically comprises of two subunits. There's glucose and galactose together. They stuck together, and that's what makes lactose. We cannot absorb lactose.
So speaking of indigestion,
we do prescribe lactose-free milk.
Mm-hmm.
Then we tell people that you can use probiotics for better gut health. Now, there's a lot of buzz starting now on postbiotics.
Mm-hmm.
What's your take on that? So there's prebiotic, there's
Probiotic,
and there's
postbiotic. Correct.
Touch base on each one of them.
Okay, so it's actually very simple. Probiotics are the beneficial organisms themselves, and they have to be alive, right? So that's a probiotic organism. There are probiotic bacteria, probiotic yeasts, and those are organisms that we take in live form. So every time we have a fermented food like a kanji or a curd, right, we get live organisms into our system. That's probiotics. Prebiotics are foods that these probiotic organisms, or actually other organisms also, like to eat. All FODMAPs are prebiotics, or all prebiotics are also FODMAPs, but not all FODMAPs are prebiotics because some FODMAPs just feed stuff we don't want to grow in our gut, right? So it's a context-based. Postbiotics is a concept where we will take either a metabolite that is produced by a certain organism, or we would just grow the organism itself in a media, in a dish, or in a fermenter, in a pot, basically. We would kill that organism, inactivate it, heat it up, for example, disintegrate the organism itself, so there's no viable organisms in that solution anymore, but all the goodies are still there. And this is a very interesting concept because basically there's a saying that you are what you eat, right? And the saying is also correct about microbes.
I think that's the reason why we prefer
These are safer.
Fermented foods over giving a probiotic a lot of times as nutritionists, because we're scared that we could cause an immune reaction.
I think that this concept is coming from two very right. Eventually, health comes from eating right. There's absolutely no substitute
to eating right
for nutrition. Nutrition is the most important. But if we're honest with ourselves for a moment, right?
Who's nutritionally disciplined to that level?
Exactly. I'm not. And I'm an expert in this field, and I really know a lot about nutrition and the microbiome and health in general. And sometimes I want a pizza, I want a beer. You know, it's okay. And I don't always eat on time. And sometimes I would like the convenience of, having a supplement, and it's fine.
When you talk about supplement, all my clients ask me this question, that the acid in the stomach kills all bacteria.
Yeah.
Technically. So I was thinking like, okay, fermented foods go in there, they're killing in all the Salman Khan good bacteria. The probiotic that comes in, which is now Salman Khan modified in a very, very powerful level, spaceship level. And so, do we get any of the probiotics of fermented foods reaching the large intestine?
Okay.
Or is it the food that ultimately just you choke out the food which will feed the bad bacteria, and you enhance the food that will grow the good bacteria?
I have a very simple answer to that question, right? The only way bacteria or anything enters our body, right, is through this end. That's we can be very clear on that, right? And we do have bacteria in our gut, lots and lots of different kinds of bacteria in our gut. Some of them turn into spores, which basically putting Salman Khan in a protective, armor, and waiting for times to get better. Some of these bacteria, when we have them with food, the pH changes a bit and they're able to survive to an extent. Some of these bacteria, for example, when we make probiotic supplements, there are certain techniques that we use, like freeze drying or putting them in encapsulation, exactly, in a capsule of lipids, special types of fats that help survive, right? So when we produce a probiotic, for example, and we would say this probiotic has a certain dose of bacteria in it, we would actually take this into account when we introduce the dose, right? So we understand that some of the bacteria are going to die in the process, and that's fine. That's normal. That's expected. But enough of them will reach
To colonize.
Yeah, and because we also do subsequent testing, we can actually find the bacteria that we gave as a probiotic later on in the gut in a stool test after some time has passed, and so we have proof of that.
So we talked about putting in something via the oral route. This is going to be a controversial question. We also have a huge number of people, and I really have not endorsed it. I actually say fasting is a better thing. Enemas, putting a pipe reverse up you and pumping out and cleansing the colon. And is this beneficial to the gut microbiome, or is it marketing?
Yeah. No, it's not beneficial. I think the answer is very simple here. You need to understand a couple of things. First of all, the gut, the colon or the large intestine, whatever you want to call it, is by far the largest organ in our body, right? It's 6 meter long, 6.5 meter long pipe. And the microbiome is basically spread throughout this entire organ. Different areas have a bit of different conditions, and they're home to slightly different organisms, but it's inhabited throughout. The last 35 to 40 centimeters of the colon is called the sigmoid colon. The sigmoid colon is the repository for stool in the body, and this is what you potentially can, quote unquote, clean with an enema. So it's a very small fraction of the entire colon. So whatever you put in there, you can really wash it out. That's one. Two, people think of stool as waste, but stool actually has a job to perform in our bodies while it's there. It is a repository for water, right, that the body can reuse. It's a repository for certain microorganisms. That's their home. They live there. We should always have stool in the gut. It's really important for the muscles around our colon to be able to stretch and get some resistance for us to be able to defecate long term. So fasting occasionally can have a tremendous beneficial effect on the gut, but fasting long term will lead to, dying.
Awesome. So now that we've understood the gut microbiome, the probiotics, and the gut composition and how probiotics can go and then be the Salman Khan and clean up and be the bodyguard and security agent and all, is it possible to create a personalized probiotic at home?
Yeah. So this is actually a very cool question. Today, we're able to take a gut microbiome test, get the information out of the test on what your gut or my gut specifically need in terms of which kind of organisms, at what dosage, and what other postbiotics or prebiotics should I add to help those specific organisms thrive in that environment, right? And then produce a single probiotic with your name on it. Say, Ryan, this is your probiotic. Now, the advantages of that are immense because, first of all, you get what you need. You don't get what you don't need. And like we've covered in the beginning of our podcast, having too many muscle cells in the heart can actually lead to disease. Having too much of a good thing is not always good. It can lead to side effects.
So are there any side effects with taking probiotics without prescription, without testing? People just like, lactobacillus, I should just take copious amounts of it.
Yeah, it's actually prescribed by doctors because that's the best that most people have access to. There's certain number of species of probiotics that normally are used, and you can get a over the counter product to help you. And until a couple of years ago, this was the standard.
Have you ever seen a case where people have reacted to probiotics?
Yeah, absolutely. So the statistic says that around a third of people will have some sort of a side effect when taking probiotics.
Which could be loose motion?
Normally, it's more gas. It's actually bloating. And that bloating normally is quite mild, and it passes on its own within a week or two. It's actually a sign that your probiotic is working. Because whenever you put a single organism in a gut, around 35-40% of people would have some kind of side effects when taking probiotics, and a minority of people will have side effects that are more severe, like significant discomfort. But normally it passes.
So as a nutritionist, when a client calls in and complains that I'm more bloated, I'm getting diarrhea or not dehydration,
So when a client calls in and asks, I'm feeling
Yeah.
distended, I didn't go to potty, or whatever thing related to the gut, as a nutritionist, should I ask them to observe it for a week or 10 days or stop and then restart again?
Yeah, so most of these side effects they will pass in the first 14 days from taking the probiotic. Most people, as I said, 2/3 will not get anything. They'll just keep taking it and as if nothing happened. Some people they'll feel mild discomfort. A minority of those people, the discomfort will be greater. The first thing that we should do is we should assess. Okay, can you power through or not? Is that actually fine? If you can, then we do nothing and it's great. And normally it passes. We actually encourage them. We say, hey, it's working. If the side effects are found to be too much to bear, then we can do something that's called dose titration. And titration basically means that we're going to create the same gradient of probiotics in your gut, but
At a lesser dose.
yeah, we start at a significantly lesser dosing, then we build it up gradually, and then you don't feel these effects as much. For most people, this will sort it out. With personalized probiotics, however, we see there is a 200% decrease in people who get side effects. So around 18% of people instead of 30, 35, 36 will actually get any side effects. And out of those people, a significantly smaller number will get side effects that, are hard to come through. With personalized probiotics, we have the advantage that we're actually able to often identify where is this discomfort coming from and reformulate a product for that specific person. And it's actually something that we're doing in rare cases, but we have that ability. We can actually give you a probiotic that we, on a very high, it's not 100%. Yeah, I'll be very honest. It's not 100% knowledge, but on a good percentage that you're going to take this new formulation, although it's going to have a few strains missing in it, but you're going to feel much more comfortable. So you can still benefit, from the good things that can happen to you if you take on.
We were talking about the stress that may be a probiotic that could cause in your gut, but today's youth, they have stress at every part of their life, whether it's a function of a society today, or you're coming in from Berlin and living in Gurgaon, or you're part of the IT overnight graveyard shift revolution. There are stresses in the form of your work, stresses in form of the diet changing, stresses in terms of just the commute, the pollution, all of these things. Now, how do all of these lifestyles impact the gut?
Yeah. So changes in our stress levels definitely can increase populations of bacteria in the gut that are known to be uh, opportunistic pathogens, which means that when they get above a certain level, they can start causing trouble, and overall diversity can drop. And overall diversity is a very important metric for microbiome health because the more different types of organisms I'm having, the more chance that I have to have a complete metabolic chain, right? Like there needs to be several organisms in a chain to perform a function. So these two metrics are very, very important in assessing the gut, the health of a gut. Consuming alcohol, being stressed, not getting enough sleep, all of these factors eventually deteriorate the gut microbiome so that in your 30s and 40s, you already start feeling these effects. And this is why we see this in India with such a high prevalence. So taking probiotics early on can actually be a really good solution for young professionals because they might not have the awareness.
I'm going to do a little bit of chat about me and many other people out there. And people come to us nutritionists because they have a gluten intolerance. And, if I eat peanuts, nothing happens to me. But I fart a lot of gas. And so I felt that when I was on gluten many years ago, before I went off it, I was very susceptible to cough, colds, and fevers. So there's a lot of questions thrown in over here. But I remember reading one article that said that ancient milk, raw milk, had the right type of bacteria which could digest gluten to a certain extent. Now, is it true that I'm missing some bacteria and that I could probably go back to being a Goan all again and eat my what we call as pav and bread?
Now let's break it down. Gluten is a protein. Okay, it has 2 subunits. And proteins, we said bacteria don't like to eat proteins. So whenever we put a gluten-based product or a wheat or a grain that contains gluten in our mouths and we digest it, and we get indigestion, I definitely believe you that you feel uncomfortable and you get sick more often, and you know, I absolutely 100% believe you. But it's not because of the gluten. It's actually because of the fact that gluten-containing foods are also high FODMAP.
So, Max, these days in the news, we see a lot of people dropping dead because of heart attacks. I'm encouraging people to do blood tests to check their HbA1c, which is the sugar marker,
Yes,
and metabolic disease in general. We're seeing we're seeing urban India get fatter,
correct.
more obese, and lifestyle diseases rearing its head. So, tell me about the gut microbiome and how we can use the gut microbiome to literally treat metabolic disease.
Yeah. So let's back up a bit. All of the diseases that you've mentioned, so we all know India is the diabetes capital of the world, right? Diabetes is a disease that basically it's when we have too much sugar in the blood. But diabetes is actually a symptom. It's not a disease. It's a symptom of a disease called metabolic syndrome. Metabolic syndrome is the medical term that doctors kind of came to realize in the last 20 years that there is a group of diseases that always come together. You never get just diabetes. You also have cholesterol problems. You never just get cholesterol problems. You also have BP. You never just get BP. You're also obese. You're also obese. You have thyroid problems. You have non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. These are the 6 diseases that always correlate with each other. They always come together. And if you have one, then you are at a significantly higher risk to get the others because they are all symptoms of a malfunctioning metabolism. And there's a medical term for this. It's called metabolic syndrome. Okay? And the protocol for the doctor that diagnoses you with your A1C, for example, if you're diabetic or pre-diabetic, is to do a whole bunch of other tests immediately after to catch whether you have one of the other ones as well. You're correct to say that these are lifestyle diseases. We do this to ourselves over many, many decades before this even manifests and comes to be. But one of the most important factors in the pathogenesis, in the creation of the disease called metabolic syndrome, is an unhealthy microbiome. Now, what is the connection there? In the microbiome, we have our Salman Khans, right, that protect our gut, and they make themselves known to the immune system by secreting short-chain fatty acids. Short-chain fatty acids have 2 main jobs in our body. One job is to appease the immune system. Whenever an immune cell can sense a short-chain fatty acid, so immune cells, they don't have eyes, right? They can see that this guy is there, but they can sense chemicals, and they have receptors for short-chain fatty acids. Whenever there's this connection, the immune cell is calm. It's anti-inflammatory. The second thing that a short-chain fatty acid does is it actually serves as a food source for our gut lining cells, right? So we have the lining of the small and large intestine, and this lining is comprised of cells that's called the colonocytes, and these cells are the main customs of our body. They decide who goes in and who does not, right? I want to absorb nutrients from my food, but I want to keep bacteria out. Whenever these cells don't get enough food, there will be gaps in that barrier. By the way, a fun fact, the fastest renewing tissue in our body is the lining of the gut. Every 90 days, we get a new blood cell. Every 4 days, all of the gut lining is new, right? So whenever these cells are not fed, the customs officer is not there and crooks can go in. When crooks go in, who catches them? The police, the immune system, right? So
that's a leaky gut?
Yeah, that is the concept of a leaky gut. When things go in when they should not go in. Leaky gut is not exactly a medical term.
The customs officers.
Yeah, it's not there. They're just not there. They didn't come. They're on strike. Yeah, they stayed homesick today with their wife or whatnot, and these guys can just come right in, sir. So the police, they get excited, and when immune cells get excited, they make chemicals, they're called cytokines, that are pro-inflammatory. They call their friends, alert, alert, please come over and help me. When this situation is now chronic, I chronically have a lack of customs officers, I have gaps in my barrier, my police is always on high alert.
There's this old saying, right? You are what you eat. Does our gut bacteria finally now change based on what you eat?
Yeah, they absolutely change. So the fastest way to change your microbiome is by changing what you eat and how you eat. That said, it's very crude. It's very, very crude. So when you go, for example, on a keto diet, it's devastating to the gut. It's absolutely devastating. I would not recommend anyone ever going on a keto diet for various reasons, but that would be like amongst the top 3.
In fact, medically, we recommend the keto diet mostly to people who have epileptic fits.
Yeah, and
which is
even
life-threatening.
yeah, and even that, right? The Atkins diet, like the original diets from the 80s that were tried on the what you mentioned, even those diets were done for intermediate amounts of times. It wasn't a blanket,
In fact-
long-term
In
intervention.
fact, because I have over 200 dietitians on my team, I've always propagated a balanced diet, seasonality in diet, going organic.
Absolutely.
I got to share this with you is that I get trolled a lot because of this whole concept that you need more protein, you need excess amounts of protein and I work with Olympic level superstars, and giving more protein to an athlete doesn't make them faster, stronger, better. So give me some inputs on supplementation. So ketogenic diet is high fat supplementation. Atkins diet is high protein supplementation. Taking copious amounts of protein powder. How does it affect the microbiome? Have you seen before and after data of people who have done these extreme diets or extreme supplements?
I've seen quite a bit of data on keto diets and diets that don't have any food for the microbiome in general, right? Because in a keto diet, your consumption of fresh produce is
But
extremely
people
low.
lose weight in keto diet. They just work on the calorie requirement and
Very
there's no
effective.
carbohydrate. Boom, you go down by
This
4
is-
5 kgs.
This is why fat diets, they're effective.
Fad.
Fad, right? FAD. They're very effective. Fasting is effective. Not eating, right? Chopping off body parts is effective. Going keto diets is effective. But what the problem is that what it does to the body in general, right? So all-cause mortality for keto diets is 3 times more of heart disease 20 years after the diet. Because you mess up your cholesterol.
I've said this for 20 years.
Right?
I got bashed up in the keto phase.
Yeah.
Post-pandemic, everyone went keto. This is a thought over here. Is it true that exercise is one of the best microbiome changes?
Absolutely. Because exercise actually reduces, so just like the microbiome will affect our hormones will also affect the microbiome.
Oh, it works the other way also?
Absolutely. And working out actually increases motility. Motility is the rate at which the food will go through our digestive tract. And this is one of the most important, most neglected, but also most important factors in gut health. I'll give you an example, okay? If you're someone that has a suboptimal microbiome and you have a food that's going to make you gassy, this food will arrive into your colon and spend some time there, and the amount of gas created in your colon will be the function of the time that the food is spending there, right? The bacteria have to have time to...
Somewhat like Boyle's law.
Yeah, exactly, right? So if the food will move faster through your colon because you just exercise and the smooth muscles around your colon are contracting more, you're going to have less gas. You're going to evacuate better, right? It could be, it's a simple thing, but it has a huge effect. Yeah, and our body was made to move.
That's why I told all my clients, Zumba is one of the best exercises
Absolutely.
to move everything out of your body, right?
Absolutely.
You literally shake it out of your body. But speaking of shaking the body, I don't know about you, but I get a lot of people asking for weight loss. And they try to lose weight. They've tried everything. And they say, oh, yeah, Ryan Fernando's helped so many Bollywood people. They get six-pack and everything.
Let me go get
buy
a six-pack from Ryan.
Let me go. And it's not that easy, by the way. So can you enlighten us about the obesity and the gut bacteria a little bit?
Yeah. So as I said, once your microbiome is suboptimal, it can actually mediate an immune response. And this immune response, this constant inflammation, right? Your custom officers not coming to work can cause the body to store more energy. So your kind of system is rigged against you, and you start getting this resistance towards losing weight. And fixing the composition of the microbiome, making it more diverse and containing the right type of bacteria can actually help people to sustainably reduce the amount of fat and especially organ fat that they have in their body.
In fact, I've seen that whenever I've done the microbiome testing and I change people's diet predominantly to vegetarian for the first 2 to 4 weeks, we see massive improvement in bowel movement, body fat
Fiber is there. Yeah.
body fat percentage drop, because I think the cortisol just comes down from the inflammatory markers. And I think the only issue I've always constantly faced is, when can I get off your diet?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that this is the most important recommendation as a health practitioner that I would have for my patients, and I'm sure you would agree, is that you need to want to be healthy.
Say that again.
You need to want to be healthy.
Health is something that if it was a commodity, you and I, Max, would be billionaires because people could purchase it. Like I remember in the olden days, I would be 2 bread, 2 idli, 2 sambar, 2 dosa. But now the dosa is constructed with not supermarket fermented, but home fermented.
And now the dosa is coming in at 9 a.m. and not 11.
So,
right? Because we can see the sugar curve as well.
And the CGM device and everything. So this has been amazing. I want to ask you a few rapid fire questions. But before I get into that, if Max was not a scientist in the life sciences as a medical practitioner to change people's health, what would you do otherwise?
Oh, very easy answer. I'd grow vegetables.
Why?
Why? There's nothing more satisfying in this world for me than to make something with my own hands that I know to be good, to pour my love and care into it, and then share it with others.
And sharing vegetables improves your microbiome. So
Absolutely.
So you'll still be an indirect microbiome scientist.
I guess that's what I was meant to be.
Okay, these are rapid fire. Okay, this is for the people who have bad guts, dopamine sensitivity is gone off the scale, and they have only
Very
30
short.
seconds with Max.
Done.
Right? 3 easy practical changes that people can start with today to improve their gut.
Don't use antibiotics when you don't have to. Get at least 35 to 40 grams of fiber in your diet every day, and diversify those sources of fiber. Fiber is the new protein. It's really important to get enough, and it's really important to have 3 or 4 different sources. So you can have an apple, you can have a rajma, you can have a fiber supplement, and you can have some soluble fiber like flax seeds, for example, in a given day. That's a perfect day for me.
If bacteria were an IPL cricket team, who would you choose to be on your IPL team? Like I would choose Virat Kohli,
Virat
Yuvraj
Kohli,
Singh,
yeah.
and Harbhajan
You
Singh.
stole it for me. Yeah, Ryan, you mentioned you want to have Virat Kohli on your team, but did you know that E. coli or E. coli is actually a very important bacteria for your gut microbiome?
Okay.
It has
This
a bad rep.
C-O-L-I.
C-O-A-L-I.
Not
Yeah.
K-O-H-L-I.
Yeah, I mean you can
Coli.
still have it
E. coli.
as a you have V. coli and you have E. coli, right?
Okay.
That's actually a very important bacteria to have in a gut microbiome. More than 90% of gut microbiomes worldwide have E. coli as a substantial constituent. But the microbiome is all about teamwork, and having too much E. coli is not always a good thing. So you want to have E. coli, but not more than 4 to 5% of your microbiome.
Who are the other all-rounders in terms of the bacteria?
Yeah, I think that if I was to single out single species bacteria, I would say that Akkermansia is one of the most proven probiotic organisms that you can get, that only comes from food as of now, not authorized as a probiotic. Fermented foods, especially fermented vegetables, pickled vegetables, contain high amounts. And I would also mention getting enough beneficial yeasts. These are very, very important to protect us from fungal infections and from pathogenic yeasts sitting in our colon and causing long-term problems.
True or false? Uric acid lowering or production happens in the gut.
False.
Adding a probiotic to orange juice will improve the probiotic.
Depending on the probiotic. Nah.
There's always a depends question.
Yeah. So whenever you study biochemistry as well.
Yes, yeah.
Whenever you're a biology student and there's a multiple choice test,
Depends.
and you have an answer that's it depends, you just know it's the right answer. It's like, just go for that.
Max, this has been an amazing podcast. We have farted, we have belched, we have pooped, we've done testing, and we have recalibrated our guts to a new level. It's been a pleasure having you, and we'll talk about poop in our next podcast at much more detail.
For sure. Thank you for having me, Ryan.
Thank you for watching this far. It's been an amazing episode, and I'm so grateful to have you till the end. If you like this video, please share this video with your loved ones. Better still, gift me a subscribe, a like, or even a comment, and we'll come back to you.